Welcome in, everyone. Let's see. All right. Let's see. Hope everyone's doing all right. How's it going, nobody? All right. I know we got several people live right now, so I'm not sure how many guests we'll get, but we'll see. Yeah, it looks like we got quite a few individuals, but yeah, quite a few individuals, but yeah, looking to have conversations, answer questions, of course. Well, it seems like my internet goes down at least once a live, hopefully. No. Well, it seems like my internet goes down at least once a live, hopefully. No more than once. And the fact we got it in early is a good sign, hopefully. But thank you everyone for joining. But we've got I've actually was invited to be a part of a moderated debate. As soon as I get a little bit more information, I'll make posts about it. But the Sup Mystic works. But yeah, we'll see how things go. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. But yeah, if you've got questions or an argument for or against theism, feel free to request up. I'll be more than happy to have a conversation with you. But all right. We'll see how today goes, but so far this week's been pretty good. Lots of really good faith conversations, and you know, I've been trying to post the VODs up on YouTube, and some people seem to have been enjoying it. But we'll see how things go. But yeah, if you've got any questions or an argument that you know you want to see how the you know, see how I can help make it stronger for you in a friendly setting as opposed to trial by fire, feel free to request up. I'll be more than happy to help. I helped someone out yesterday in regards for the argument for change, where they had defined change as the actualization of potentials. And I was expressing to them that apparently the current theory of time in the universe, it doesn't allow for that language, but I just learned that apparently there's also C and D theories of time, and I guess in C theory of time, that type of language could be possible. Well, we had Lego join real quick, but dropped before I could let them up. But if what I need to do is look into to see, because I know B theory is the most popular one, but if C theory is just as plausible as B theory, then there isn't necessarily a defeater for the argument from change other than just personal preference. And one could still be justified in their belief for God and still run the argument for change or motion with the understanding of change being defined as the actualization of potentials. Yes, high IQ. I do believe that Christians can hold to B theory. The reason why I say that is if God is the source of all creation, then he's also the source of our future events existing. And if he also knows future events, then all of reality is present to him, kind of like a film reel. And if you read Thomas Aquinas as an example, while he didn't have this idea of B theory in the way that we have that understanding, the way that he talks about God and God's relation to time is very close to B theory, where past, present, and future are all present to God, and that's how he's omnipresent, is because he's present across all of time, and it's real to him. So there isn't an issue for the Christian to hold to B theory. But yeah, looking for anyone who's got an argument that they'd like help forming, or seeing what some common criticisms could be, or even if you just got a question about Catholicism or Christianity and just want to yap, and I promise I won't try to convert you to Catholicism, and I just ask that you don't try to convince me to leave Catholicism. This is just for conversation, exploring ideas, and coming to a better understanding across different worldviews. But welcome everyone that's been joining in. Fang, I do not like the transcendental argument. It is often used by presuppositioners. So a presuppositionist is someone who holds the position that God cannot be shown, or we can't arrive at knowledge of God, that we have to presuppose him. I disagree with that and believe that through natural reason, one can arrive at the knowledge that God exists. And the transcendental argument, or tag, is what it's trying to do is argue that unless one presupposes God, there is no justification for logic. I disagree with that because what the transcendental argument is trying to say is that unless there is some transcendental entity to ground the validity of transcendentals like logic, then we can't verify the validity or accuracy of logic leading us to truth. But I think that position is defeated very simply through the cogito. So I think, therefore, I am. So to summarize, to elaborate while still keeping it pretty brief, the argument for the I think, therefore I am, or the cogito ergo sum, what it's saying is that there is an experience, and when you have that experience, you are aware and thinking on that experience. And in order for there to be a subject doing the act of thinking, the subject has to exist, so we can know that there is a subject, there is an I, because of the existence of the action of thinking. And thinking can only exist in regards to an object. So, from there, from I think therefore I am, we know that there is an I. And the I is itself. So from the I, we have the law of identity for I equals I. And then we have experience. Well, the experience is not I. So experience does not equal I. And if experience is not the same as I, then something can't be both. It's, I can't be both experience and not experience, and I can't be myself and not myself. So that's the law of non-contradiction. And then the final thing, so for the law of excluded middle, the law of excluded middle is just further elaborating from the experience is not I. Law of excluded middle simply states something is either I or not I. And whatever not I is, we call experience. And so that I don't think the transcendental argument works, because they're trying to argue that you can't know the validity of logic or have a way to arrive at the truth-seeking of logic. But most people who run the transcendental argument, they'll probably acknowledge at least this. And what they're trying to do is get the atheist to admit that they're using logic to justify logic. But here I am grounding or showing the source of the very law. So the I, and I recognize the I is I, well, that's the law of identity. I'm not using logic, that's how I know the law of identity. The experience is the not I, and from that we get both the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle. And because of that, that's how an atheist could ground logic and know that it leads to truth, because we know that this is true, because to deny this leads to a reductio. And even the theist would want to say, and if they deny this, then at that point you've got other problems on your hand. But if they would acknowledge that you can know that you exist. But if I can know that I exist, then I have the groundings that I need for the laws of logic. But thank you for everyone who for joining so far. Currently don't have anyone in the guest request box. But yeah, if you've got a question or an argument that you want me to help you go over, but it looks like we got Zeno actually.
Hey, what's up?
Sup? Are you at least over the age of 18?
Yep. I'm the same Zeno from the Discord, so.
Oh, okay. What brings you up here today?
I want to know your thought. Okay, so I don't know. I was thinking whenever I go back up on Ian's live, I don't know if I want to run like some type of Bayesian argument, or if I want to run like the contingency argument again. I wanted to know your thoughts on like the Aristotelian, like it's called like the Aristotelian, like, oh my gosh, the name's slipping from me. But basically, like, okay, if we have this is all talking about the principle of sufficient reason. Ian's gonna say like, okay, yeah, there exists some like necessary wave function. But what Aristotelian frameworks say is like, okay, yeah, you can have mathematical objects, but there's still some underlying structure there. So even though, like, yes, there's this math, okay, but the axioms are more fundamental necessary truths, and then, well, eventually you're just going to get to a single necessary truth, God. how do I like? Do you have any good what's it called? Things to read to
Yeah.
develop that and learn more?
So,
Yeah.
um, so this is something that I'm currently working on myself. So the what I find often ends up happening is, like you were saying, like Ian, they acknowledge the existence of or the requirement of some necessary existing thing. They call it the mathematical objects. Um, so the disagreement isn't on whether or not a thing exists necessarily. You and Ian both agree on that.
Yep.
But have either of you done the work to identify what kind of nature a necessary thing ought to have?
Uh, yeah, I think Ian would just say that it's a mathematical object,
But that's
therefore,
that's just an assertion at that point.
right.
And you're saying it's God, but have you demonstrated why? That's an assertion. So this is a mistake both atheists and theists make. Where, all right, so now we know that we need a necessary existing thing. Some will say, oh, it's just the universe implicator. Some will say mathematical objects. Some will say the wave function. Others will say energy. And others will say God. But has anyone actually done the work to look at, to determine what kind of nature a necessary thing ought to have in order to be necessary?
Yeah, I guess I guess not really.
Yeah,
I know you want to put it in your Thomist language,
you
so
you
I
saw
mean
right
maybe
through me because I do believe Thomas Aquinas does do that in his argument De Ansia, which you might still appreciate because it still uses a lot of Aristotelian language. But
sure, for sure.
but the fact of the matter is that a lot of theists will arrive at necessary thing and say, and therefore God. But they haven't explored the nature of this necessary thing in order to then say, okay, now we have this nature that a necessary thing ought to have. Let us explore to see if anything that we can observe matches that. Let us see if
Yeah.
mathematical objects match that. The way that I like to describe it is back when Einstein was still working out his theory of relativity, he came up with this mathematical formula where he discovered that depending on the variables, if you went to one extreme end, you got black holes, and if you got to the opposite extreme end, you got white holes. Now, because of the mathematical formula, we knew the nature that these kinds of things ought to have, but we hadn't observed to know if they actually existed. And then scientists, much later on, started observing the night sky and noticed, hey, wait a minute. This star took an orbit that is way too violent, way too sharp, seemingly around nothing. Well, this matches the phenomena that was described by black holes. So we already had an idea of black
Would the
holes
parallel
exist.
here be consciousness?
What was that?
Would the parallel here be consciousness
Not
insofar
necess-
as
not necessarily. More of that's the route that you ought to go.
yep.
Is okay. We've gotten to the necessary thing. Now let us explore what enables this thing to be necessary. And once that's been established, then we can then go out and explore the world or metaphysical possibilities that have that nature. And once that's been established, then we can now definitively and positively declare it's a mathematical object, or it's the universe, or it's energy, or it's God. That's where the dialectic, I believe, is and ought to be focused on. But right now, we're also busy arguing on something we already agree on, the
Right.
existence of something necessarily existing.
By the way, thanks to whoever sent me the
Yeah, that was
whatever
nobody.
they sent me.
Yeah, nobody on fire. Yeah, thanks for the support for both of
Yeah,
us.
yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, so yeah, how would you go about exploring that nature?
So I do have my attempt pinned on my profile. It is
Okay.
the very first. It's the only pinned video. But I think the easiest way to go about it, I think, is effectively we've established that the necessary thing exists, or not necessarily that it exists, but the necessary thing is impossible to exist. Well, in order for something to, or impossible to not exist, sorry. So in order for something to be impossible, it would mean that negating it leads to a contradiction. For example, if I said the door is open, well, nothing in the statement the door is open leads to a contradiction except for the fact that the door is currently closed. That is, to be extremely precise, that's not a contradiction. That's that's contrary evidence. So there's evidence to the contrary. A true
Right.
contradiction would be where I am saying the door is both open and not open. So for the necessary thing, it would need to have a nature where to say it does not exist is the same as saying it is A and not A.
Right.
So I think I have an answer, and the argument tries to go through to justify that answer. There's still some things that I need to work on to account for a couple of different worldviews I wasn't aware of at the time I was making the argument. But like I said, it is definitely inspired by Thomas Aquinas's work on being in essence. But that's the
I think I have that book.
yeah.
Hold on. Wait. Hold on. I'm gonna turn my camera and show you. Hold on. I think I have that book. Yep. Yep. Here. Let's see. Flip.
Yep. I think I've got that exact same translation too.
Yeah. Yep. That's cool. Then I have the Sumo right here.
Nice. Yeah. So yeah, just read through that book then. Like if it's the one that I'm thinking of, most of it is going to be commentary. That's why it's so thick. But if you even just like if you read only what Thomas Aquinas says, you can read it in like an hour at most.
Oh no, I have a really thin one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I have the commentary. Yeah. Compared to the Summa, yeah, that's like nothing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you want, so what I would recommend is read that so that way you know where I'm getting the inspiration from, and then watch my video, because what I'm trying to do is basically take the conclusion from that and use modern language that avoids the Aristotelian framework that a lot of people don't like to use.
Yep. Yep, makes sense. Zeno, what's up, Zeno? It's been a minute. Yeah. Where does he know me from?
That's Jaden. He had to change his profile.
Oh, okay, sure.
But
wait, I don't know who Jaden is.
He pops around in a lot of different atheist streams. If you know,
okay.
Cody from Evidence First, he's.
Yes.
Okay,
sure. Yep.
Yes.
Yep, makes sense.
Anything else though?
No. I mean, that was pretty much it.
All right, appreciate it. Glad I could help out.
Yep. Thanks.
But yeah, thanks Nobody on Fire for the confetti for both me and Zeno. But it looks like we had D Sitter, who is next. Hello.
Hello.
How old are you?
I am over 40.
All right. And what brings you up here today?
I'm Catholic,
Okay.
and I think I have an argument for the existence of God. Not a proof, but a compelling argument.
Okay.
Shall we run through it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, like, my background is in mathematical physics.
Okay.
I think a very good indicator of, and I enjoyed your conversation about Aquinas.
Appreciate it.
And I think that's relevant here, is the radical interpretability of the underlying mechanics of the universe to the human intellect is something that a priori would not be expected under any kind of neutral view of naturalism. And the fact that the human intellect can grasp extremely abstract and subtle and elegant and beautiful, aesthetically beautiful mathematical models which describe not only the microscopic but the macroscopic terms of quantum mechanics and cosmology of the universe is something which I think requires some degree of explanation and is not something to be pushed aside. Yeah. And there's a very famous paper in the 60s by Eugene Wigner called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics. Physics, basically, in terms of predicting phenomena and behavior.
Let's see. I've got, just real quick, The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics and Natural Sciences was out of the 1959 Richard Courant Lecture in Mathematical Science.
No, it's a paper by Eugene Wigner.
Oh, there it is.
Wigner spelled, Wigner.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, no, that was Wikipedia. It was the title of the lecture, and then if you continue on, delivered at the New York University by the physicist Eugene Wagner, and published in Communion in Pure and Applied Mathematics in 1960. Okay.
So there's this kind of weird thing that the human intellect is able to grasp or able to come up with the ideas of continuous symmetry groups, algebras, and conceptual models, which then extremely applicable to the model of particle physics, like electrons, photons, fundamental particles. And then also, so that at the microscopic, then also at the macroscopic, the cosmological scale, something like general relativity and a Riemannian manifold, blah, 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 all that Einstein stuff.
Right.
Is also able to comprehend the vast dynamics of the universe in very understandable and quantifiable terms. And if we just sit in our mesoscopic, experience, like watching cannonballs fly off a wall or watching apples fall off a tree, it's not immediately obvious that our evolution would have provided the mental capacities to be able to derive quantum mechanics or the lambda CDM model at the two extremes of the scale of the universe. And if we were to take the presupposition that the universe was created by a mind and that we somehow participated in that mind in some kind of similarity or understanding or a desire of that mind for us to understand that creation, then it would be expected that we would be able to understand quantum mechanics and cosmological models. Not fully yet. We haven't finished the story, but we've made incredible progress. And please stop me if I'm just rambling.
So, but I mean, I think I get what you're trying to argue for is that, and it's somewhat similar to Thomas Aquinas's argument from Telos in the Five Ways, where it's basically, hey, not Telos. Maybe it was Telos. But
I want to. I don't know specifically, but I want to link it back to Aquinas because I think Aquinas's writings, and I'm by no means an expert. I've only superficially read them, but it feels like he was absolutely destroyed by the 1680s, by the Newtonian clockwork universe kind of model of creation. Where everything had an initial condition. Billiard balls on the snooker table, and things were just moving and hitting each other and bouncing off. But the revolution that happened over the last 100 years in terms of starting with relativity and Einsteinian conceptions of space-time, being space and time are interchangeable. So if you go faster, if you accelerate, then time slows down. And then with the revolution in quantum mechanics, where the observer of the system is integral into, in some sense, the measurement that you take, or you need an observer in some description to make an observation. In taking the observer's role seriously in physics, opened up huge developments and advancements in the field. And I feel that Aquinas's kind of views, even though they were basically destroyed by, sort of clockwork Newtonian mechanics in the 1680s, feel like they should really be coming back in the last 100 years, because modern physics has kind of moved us closer to his conceptions and further away from the
So,
clock.
so the thing with like Thomas Aquinas is he tried to do his arguments as like scientifically independent, where he was more concerned about the metaphysics, not the actual physics on how things interacted, but
Of
with
course.
the metaphysical relationships between things. And
Sure. And
so,
I'm not saying that Aquinas understood quantum mechanics,
oh
but
yeah,
his arguments are more applicable today with Bell's inequality or modern quantum mechanics than they would have been after Newton published the Principia.
mm-hmm. So let me read the fifth way to you real quick, because I think it's trying to capture what you're pointing at. The fifth way is taken from the governance of the world. So, like you were talking about, the order, the mathematical structure of the world. We see that things which lack intelligence, such as natural bodies, so that would be, the like trees, rocks, the planets, like everything.
Electrons,
Yeah,
superclusters, the
yeah,
Big Bang, the CMB. Yeah.
yeah. They act for an end, and this is evident from their acting always, or nearly always, in the same way so as to obtain the best result. AKA, when we look around reality, it's predictable. We're able to observe, make a prediction, and if that prediction is accurate, the outcome will occur, and it will always occur under the same conditions.
Can I jump in here, or can I put a pin in that?
Put a pin in that real quick.
Okay.
Hence, it is plain that not fortuitously, but designedly. So basically, saying basically, in order for it to happen on a consistent, regular basis, it can't just be random chance. There has to be a intention behind it. Do they achieve their end? Now, whatever lacks intelligence cannot move towards an end unless it be directed by some being endowed with knowledge and intelligence, as the arrow is shot to its mark by the archer. Therefore, some intelligent being exists by whom all natural things are directed to their end, and this being we call God. So, to bring it back to what you were talking about, because we see order, structure, and things operating towards something, in order for a thing to have an orientation or be pointed towards something, there needs to be something that is doing the pointing. And so for you, you're saying, hey, we see this mathematical formula, things operate according to this order, they operate according to this structure, and there has to be something that formed and oriented the world to follow along this path and this structure.
Correct. But I would take it one step further, because and this is where I wanted to jump in. So I'm going to take my pin out.
Yeah.
Observation. Okay, so we can observe a bunch of phenomenon in our reality. We can watch cannonballs fly off walls. We can watch apples fall to the ground. That's all great. And that exactly was the scientific revolution of late 1600s. But what has turned out in the last 100 years is that what mathematicians, scientists found aesthetically pleasing, but not applicable to the real world, then turned out to be the key to describing fundamental phenomenon in the real world. I'll give you a concrete example. The mathematics of Einstein's gravity was developed by a German fellow called Riemann about a generation before Einstein developed general relativity. And Riemann was exploring field called differential geometry, just purely from an abstract point of view. But also there was an aesthetic elegance to it. It was very appealing to mathematicians because things just began to fit together. And also when quantum mechanics was developed, one of this is not very technically accurate, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, one of the key concepts facilitated the development of quantum mechanics was the idea of the square root of -1 or the complex number I, because it has certain rotational properties which fit to wave function dynamics. But that was a intuition and a development made by mathematicians just for the pure aesthetics, almost for the joy of it, centuries before it found application in our physical world. And this is why I wanted to jump in here, because it's not just we look at the physical world and we can describe it. We think of things which are aesthetic, elegant, economical to the human intellect, and then in certain very important cases, find application into the physical world from that thought process. And that is, in my estimation, completely unpredictable and completely unexpected under any kind of random natural physicalist model.
So let me show you what I typed up real quick. Obviously, it's probably still going to need some work, but it might help you kind of structure and formalize the thoughts that you're having on this. If there is a pattern, there is intent behind that pattern. The universe operates according to a pattern. Conclusion, there is intent behind the pattern of, or this should be the universe. There is intent behind the pattern of the universe. The source of that intent we call God. So, like I said, it might need some cleaning up, but this might help you in formalizing the thoughts that you're having and observations that you're making, because all of the things that you're doing are justifications for these premise, or especially this premise, because as you can, and as well as premise 2, I guess. But yeah, so everything that you're doing is providing the justifications for the premises of these arguments or these premises. And if someone accepts the justifications for these premises, it leads to this.
But again, I would say, but there's a pattern within our mind that we find intriguing, aesthetically beautiful, and elegant. And then later we find an application of that mental pattern into describing phenomena,
and
which we would never have. It's extremely unlikely that it would have worked the other way.
So
you can stare at an electron for as long as you like, but you wouldn't figure out a gauge group.
And this is why. So this is what I was going to say, though. The reason why you still want to start off with this is because the very common objection to this is, in evolution, things that evolved to recognize patterns, survived. So why should we think that our ability to recognize patterns is evidence of God? And that's when you bring in your point of well, we have patterns that we found aesthetically pleasing that we predicted should be the case, but it didn't seem like it matched the standard of evidence at the time.
Not even predicted. Mathematicians found certain patterns aesthetically pleasing and economical, and then later physicists were trying to explain data, and they went back into the literature, usually like a few generations or a century beforehand, and then figured out, these are exactly the tools that we need to explain now what we're seeing.
Yeah. But
they were there. And this is what Einstein used Riemannian geometry to push forward his theory of general relativity. So it's kind of like the pattern was established in our minds before we had use for it in reality.
But that's what I'm saying is you could use that to push against the pattern resulting from evolution and more of the...
I see what you mean, structuring it as a dialectic, right?
Yeah. And now they say that it was well, hold on, we see this, therefore our ability to recognize patterns couldn't have it doesn't seem to have just come from evolution, just from us interacting with this, because we came up with patterns that weren't observed, and then it come from evolution just from us interacting with this, because we came up with patterns that weren't observed, and then it patterns and in a sense predict what wasn't yet experienced. And then we found out that we the patterns that we predicted are actually the case.
Yeah.
Versus what you're trying to point out is like if the naturalistic explanation of our ability to recognize patterns is the case, where it just is us putting pattern into randomness, like making a pattern out of nothing, then when we were
Mm.
making our own patterns with intent, if the pattern of the universe really and truly was random, then it shouldn't have matched our intentional patterns.
Yeah, it shouldn't have matched our intellect.
Yeah, that's
There's
why.
no reason why the fundamental structure of the model
Mhm.
could be all conceivable to the human intellect,
Yeah,
because it doesn't help our evolution to understand how color confinement operates in quarks. And it's not something that we could ever observe directly with our senses,
yeah,
but we can intuit a structure in our minds because we find it economical and pleasing. And then it turns out that that structure is applicable to standard model quarks, electrons, photons, like the entire gamut. And what then is amazing is that the same mathematical structure, with a few tweaks in
mm-hmm.
terms of how many degrees of freedom, describes all of the forces apart from gravity, because we haven't unified it, but strong, weak, electromagnetic. It
Yeah,
all operate on the same mathematical basis. And that's incredible. That's amazing. That's the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics, or in my parlance, the unreasonable effectiveness of the human intellect.
yeah. So, like I said, take the that short syllogism that I used and use it as a jumping off point to
Mm,
help. Like I said, the purpose of that syllogism that I presented isn't to be the
mhm.
complete argument, because you know this
Sure.
subject a lot more in depth than I do. But you're able to take that knowledge, use the structure that I of the argument that I presented as a jumping off point to help provide the justification. Like I see someone in the chat going like, well, how do you substantiate P1? How do you support the claim that patterns necessitated intentionality? And so you've got the expertise in that area to be able to do that. But that's the roadmap. It's not a
Mm.
complete roadmap, but you've got the expertise in that field to be able to fill in the gaps of that roadmap.
What do you think about the argument from your point of view?
Um, I think like because it's very close to like I said, the fifth way. I think there's some strength in it, and the way that you're approaching it, I think, can be very appealing to a lot of physicists and mathematicians. It still needs some work, but I think you can do that. Like there's potential in that argument.
Cheers, bro.
Yeah,
Great conversation. Take
absolutely.
care.
Glad you could come up. All right. And thank you again, Nobody on Fire, for the crown. But I think Lonesome with Company was next, because I saw that they were waiting in the chat for a bit. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Are you over the age of 18?
Yes.
All right. And what brings you up today?
I'm an agnostic atheist,
Mm-hmm.
and I have an argument I like to pose to theists
Okay.
um, about the not safety. That's not the right word. About the about faith
Okay.
and using faith. And you got really quiet for me all of a sudden. 1 second.
Some reason like TikTok does this weird thing with the audio when you join, where it lowers the audio for the host.
Okay, got it. But I'll try to lay it out, and it's a bit extensive. But
Mm-hmm.
um, if we have two ship captains. Captain one sets sail with the passengers, and before he sets sail, he does all his checks to
Mm-hmm.
obtain certainty the ship is good to go.
Yep.
Ship sinks. Everyone dies. Second ship, captain has done the voyage times before. He's checked the machines time before. He's got good, solid evidence to believe the ship's fine, but he doesn't check it this time, and he puts his faith in the ship that it should do this voyage like it's done 100 times before. it sets sail, sinks, everyone dies.
Mm-hmm.
We would pass judgment upon the second captain harsher than we would the first.
Yep.
I think as a premise most people agree with.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that and tie it into Pascal's wager, specifically the extension of Pascal's wager that effectively, once you factor in multiple religions and beliefs, both a theist and a non-theist are risking the same things.
Mm-hmm.
If a theist cannot claim objective certainty on the truth of God, they are captain too, so they ought not share that belief with others, as it could influence them to leave what could be truth,
Mm-hmm.
as they're operating on faith. So that's the general, very short. I'd normally do a much longer breakdown of it.
You're good. So this works. This is going to work for most Christians that you're going to encounter, because of the way that most of them do use Pascal's wager. But I've got an opinion on Pascal's wager. I'll share later, or if you want, I can send you a video I did on it, going a lot more in depth. As well, but it also has to do with the way that a lot of Christians treat or define faith. They define faith almost as like blind obedience, but the scriptures is very contrary to the type of faith as the way that you were describing it, which I do agree most Christians practice essentially. Because in Paul, I forget which letter, but Paul does talk about, testing. If someone comes to you and claims something, to test it, not just to accept it blindly, but to test it. Look at the fruits of their teachings. Like, effectively be a skeptic. And then in James chapter 2, verse 15, suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. So in the case of your second captain, who, like, oh, it was all fine, all before, so I don't need to check it this time, he's in violation of the faith as the letter of James describes it, because he's not actually acting on it. He's not acting on what he desires. And so from there, it won't work for someone like myself who views faith as Paul describes it, the assurance of what is unseen and the hope for what is to come. The best way that I can describe it is when you go to, what's your favorite fast food restaurant?
Taco Bell.
Taco Bell. All right. I love me a good Taco Bell. I try not to go there as often, but I'm with you on that. You pay before you receive the food, right?
Sure.
Oh, is there a Taco? Yeah. I was going to say, wait, is there a Taco Bell where you can get the food after you pay? But you pay,
Sorry.
You pay before you get the food, right? So what assurance do you have that you're actually going to get the food and they're not just going to deny that you ever gave them the money and run away with your money?
Like a social contract.
Yeah, like there's a promise, and so you have assurance for it. So it's not a blind faith. You're not being unreasonable, and you know that something is going to come, even though there isn't, technically speaking, evidence that it is going to happen, because you only have evidence for things that have occurred. And if things are predictable, you can use the evidence of past events to predict a future event. But once human agency comes in, that gets a little bit trickier. So the faith for me as a Catholic is closer to that kind of faith where, hey, I have assurance and I have reasons to hold the salvation and the resurrection of the body, because that's what's being talked about.
Okay. Well, I did try to sort of touch on that in the definition of faith with the captain too, which is that he has the evidence, right? Like he's done the checks, he's done the voyage before.
Which
he doesn't have the immediate certainty, right?
Yeah. Which
then,
leads into the
Go
second
ahead.
instruction. I was going to say that leads into the second instruction of, especially like of Jesus, to always be prepared. If you look at every single one of his parables about like the end times, he's always telling people to be prepared and act like it's just around the corner. So the captain, to be in true faith according to the instructions of Christ from the Christian perspective, should have been, hey, even though it hasn't sunk the last 99 times, I need to be prepared just in case the 100th time it would have sunk.
Okay, I think I see where you're coming from, but I don't know if it fully addresses what I'm trying to get at, and it
Well,
might be
like,
because I gave a very short version.
and it very well could have been the case, but like what I was saying though, Lonesome, is the way that you present it does address the position a lot of Christians hold. So it could very well be the case that there's uh, this is going to sound horrible, and I don't mean it in a bad way, a bias of success, where because you've had success with the argument, you think it'll work universally. The point that I was just trying to make is like it works against a very particular group of theists who hold to a very particular view of faith. I disagree with their view of faith. This is how I understand faith, and so your description of the second captain doesn't match the type of faith that I believe a Christian ought to have. Now, maybe you've in the further argument or in the more in-depth argument, you do have a way to defeat that. But for me, faith isn't blind, and faith also is prepared for what could be right around the corner.
I think I understand what I would normally do in a longer form conversation. I'm trying to truncate it because I don't have long to chat.
You're good.
Is that like, um, I sort of brought in a little with Captain One of the certainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the argument holds if you can claim objective certainty, right? That like if you claim objective certainty in God, it doesn't really matter. You know, right? But I think if someone recognizes they can't make an objective certainty claim
Mm-hmm.
about the nature and reality of God existing, then there is always going to be some degree of faith, like Captain Number Two, in their decision making of their belief, right?
So here's the like. So it's going to depend on what standard of certainty you want for knowledge, because there's something called, I think it's called strong knowledge. There's an epistemic position that in order to have knowledge, you need to know that you know the knowledge. So, for example, you know that 2 plus 2 equals 4. And you also know that you know 2 plus 2 equals 4. But then we get into a problem of, well, wait a minute, now I know that I know that I know 2 plus 2 equals 4. And now I know that I know that I know that I know that I know 2 plus 2 equals 4. And so on infinitely. Which is problematic. But certainty doesn't have to be to the level of knowledge, so to speak. So even though you have high certainty, for example, that you're not a brain in a vat, to the point where you're confident to be able to say no, or that you know that you're not a brain in a vat, there are other things, like, say, for example, the existence of Socrates. We have no contemporary records of Socrates. Everything was written by Plato, who we're not even sure was a singular person or if it was just a collection of people using Plato as a pseudonym. And every account that we have about Socrates is from this, and we know that the dialectics recorded were often fictionalized, even if based around quote-unquote actual events. Yet, historians are pretty certain that Socrates existed, that he was an actual historical figure. But that certainty might be lower than the brain in a vat. So then the question then becomes, what level of certainty is required in order to be able to claim knowledge? Does it just need to be 51%? Or let's say there's multiple options, and this is the option that has the most likelihood. Let's say it's 3 options, and one option is 40%, and the others are 30%. between the two of them. Can you claim certainty just by 40% because the other two are 30% each? So, trying to bring certainty in by 40% because the other two are 30% each. So, trying to bring certainty in. All right, I am back. I don't know how much, but the point that I was trying to get at is, to make a long story short, if you bring certainty into it, you're then going to have to defend epistemic claims and what accounts for certainty, what accounts for knowledge, and what accounts, and that's going to get extremely tricky. As someone who studied epistemology, that gets really tricky really fast.
But yes, I agree where you're coming from, and when I normally present the argument, I hold by that there is no objective certainty with like one exception, which I agree with Descartes, and I think therefore I am is a self-evident objective truth, right?
Yeah.
But I don't believe certainty can be claimed about anything.
What
true
about
certainty?
what about the law of identity? Are you certain about the law of identity?
Refresh.
A equals A.
Refresh
like
my.
A is A. The thing is itself.
No, I don't even think that can be claimed as objectively true.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I disagree. Like, let me see. Let me see. Do I still have it?
I see Marky Mars in the comment there going, that's sort of how I would, yes.
Yeah.
Certainty may not be able to be claimed, but probability can be claimed.
Let me see.
Agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Here we go. So, this is something that I've been using whenever I wanted to run against people who run the transcendental argument for God and try to say that unless God exists, you can't use logic and you can't ground logic. So starting from the cogito, I think, therefore I am. So the law of identity just says that a thing is itself. Well, if there's an I, and I know that I exist, so I know that I am I. That's the law of identity. And the reason why I'm able to have thoughts is because I'm experiencing something that's not I. Now, whether those experiences are true or not is a different question altogether, but it's also irrelevant. All I know is that there is something that is not I. So there's experience and not I. So from the existence of I and not I, we get the law of non-contradiction. If your experience was the same as you, then there wouldn't be a way for you to differentiate between you and yourself, because it's just you, and now there's nothing for you to think on. Therefore, no awareness of the I. So there has to be something that's not I. And the law of excluded middle continues on from that. Something is either you or it's not you. It can't be both. Hence the law of non-contradiction. All of that's grounded in the cogito.
I see. It's a good point. It's like I don't even want to claim the I. Is what I'm trying to say.
But then now you're disagreeing with the cogito. If you can't claim that we know that the I exists, that disagrees with the cogito.
I see what you're saying.
I get. Now, trust me,
yeah.
I get what you're coming from. You're trying to avoid. You're trying to stay epistemically humble and recognize, hey, we know far less than we think. But just because we know far less than we think doesn't mean that we know nothing.
Sure. Yeah.
There are things.
I'm sorry.
There are things we can know, and there are analytical truths. And I think even Gödel's incompleteness theorem, like if the question is like, well, the law of identity, we can't prove the law of identity without appealing to it. That's why it's quote unquote grounded. But Gödel's incompleteness theorem shows that there are things that are true in closed systems, but there are things that are true that are unprovable, yet we can still know that they're true, even though they're unprovable, and we can know it with certainty. So that's the So even though something can't be proven, doesn't mean we can't be certain about it, if that makes sense.
I think I follow it. I don't know enough about it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't agree with it, but I don't know exactly what premise to disagree with right off the bat,
there
and
is
I didn't
a
see it in front of me.
there is a YouTube video that I think does a pretty good job of explaining it. It's very short. It's by TED Talks Online. It's an animated video, but if you just Google in YouTube TED Talks Gödel's incompleteness theorem, it should come up. And
Okay,
that video did help me come to a pretty good understanding of it. Like I wouldn't be able to tell you what the proof is, like how he proved it in mathematical detail, but I can at least give a layman's explanation of it to the point where someone who does know it very well and is a mathematician and it said that was actually pretty good for a layman. Does it miss some things? Yes, but it gives a good enough understanding of the situation. So, um, to end on at least a positive note, because like I said, your argument will work for most people who you encounter. So, if your goal is to get people to move away from interacting with faith in a unhealthy way, keep doing it. If your goal is to prove that all theism is bad, then it's not going to work. So it's going to be dependent on what your goal is. Um, but based on our conversation, I think what you're trying to do is show that we still need, like, people need to do an action and people need to be responsible in their beliefs and have proper justification for them and not to just act blindly, which I agree with you 100%.
sure. It's sort of. I mean, I'd say like at 90%, 80% of the way there, maybe. I do gotta get going. But I'll give you
Yeah.
like the quick little grand, like my intentions behind the discussion. It's like
Uh-huh.
as someone that doesn't believe that there is a claimable objective certainty, which I needs to do some reading on to refute that kind of
Mm-hmm.
the what you posed to me. Um, it is more of like if there is no objectable certainty that can be claimed, faith enters every decision making when it comes to belief, regardless of justification for that faith. Faith,
It sounds
as
like
we
you
perceive it, is nuts.
it sounds like then you and I are speaking of faith differently then. If by faith you mean um something without justification, or you just mean theism in totality, that's not what I mean by faith. So,
I mean,
um,
something without certainty, like believing something without certainty is what I mean by faith.
but at which then gets into at what level does certainty become justified? So, like I said, let me get you
Yeah,
the video that let me see. Can shoot a chat or send me a follow once you drop down, and I can get you the video that I was talking about, as well as let me see. What was it? Oh, my video on Pascal's wager, since we didn't touch on it, like I said, people are misusing it. Um, but let me get you the TED video that I was talking about, as well as the Pascal's wager video that I did.
sure. Shout you, Paul. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
All right, absolutely. You have a good one.
You as well.
All right. Thank you, everyone who's joined so far. Thank you, Nobody on Fire, for the support, as well as Poopman Jones. Great to see you. But Marky Mars was next. Here we go. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How old are you?
I'm 28.
All right. And what brings you up here today?
Um, I've been reading and listening to two books
Mhm.
by Joshua Rasmussen, Dr. Joshua Rasmussen. They're The Bridge of Reason, or How Reason, or 10 Steps of Reason, How It Can Lead to God. And he essentially is going over his foundation theory of how, from looking at reality, we can build that the foundation of reality itself is a moral, intelligent,
Mhm.
powerful being.
What's funny is, it's funny you bring that up, because in the Discord, server that I'm in, people were talking about the Joshua Rasmussen debate with Michael Humer that was going on earlier today. I don't know if it's still going on.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But it's funny that you brought that name up, because today was the first time I've heard of that name in relation to that.
Hmm.
So it's fun. It's just a funny coincidence that you brought it up.
Got you.
But
I
okay.
can't. I can't say like I have. Essentially, he does 10 steps.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go over 10 steps. One, that's a lot. But I think what I want to essentially start out is that there has to be a necessary foundation
Mm-hmm.
of reality
Yep.
that isn't contingent.
Yep. I agree
Okay,
100%.
got you.
So
So should I just go or
well, no. So, to help understand what the purpose of this live is, the reason why I call it an apologetic workshop, like as you saw with the previous guest, I was having a
Mhm.
conversation with him on his argument. Yes, it was an argument against Christians and faith and theism, but what I was doing was I was saying, okay, so this works for this group, but it doesn't work for this group. Oh, and you hold to this epistemic view? Well, here's some problems with that epistemic view that you might want to look into to help. Like, so I'm not here to debate in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to convince you that God exists, and or
Yeah, yeah.
but it's just like, hey, you you've got an argument, and you just want to know, hey, is this as strong as it possibly could be? And I'll workshop it with you, hence the name.
Yeah, I think cuz when I've talked to a friend of mine and we
Hmm.
go over this, I was in like one dude's class for like for things relating to philosophy and
Hmm.
deism. And I he kept switching, like, to help me practice, switching between a necessary foundation,
Hmm.
between eternal,
Hmm.
and it was sort of like his way to like bypass or not address my point. But I don't understand how, essentially, from uh from Dr. Rasmussen's argument,
Hmm.
how eternal and necessary aren't like together. Like, I I just got to get
Yeah.
into the argument to where
No,
I'm
so
sorry.
no, so the thing is that the problem that you're describing, I'm very familiar
Hmm.
with. So,
Got you.
you're good. So this comes from a mistake that a lot of people make, where they think eternal equals infinite. Depending on who
Mm,
you speak to, eternal just means for all time, or it means unchanging, depending on the particular framework. So, now, you were saying that your friend would switch between necessary and eternal. Just because something is eternal does not mean it is necessary. But if something is
mm,
necessary, by definition, it has to be eternal. Kind of like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares.
yes.
So, um, in the particular faith tradition that I am, I'm a Catholic who follows the Thomistic classical theism school of thought. Um, so God is eternally creating, which means that there was never a state where he was not creating. And because he was always creating, then the universe, quote unquote, always existed. But it doesn't mean that the universe is necessary, because it's still
Yeah.
dependent and requires God in order for it to exist. If God didn't decide to create, then the universe wouldn't exist. So even though it's eternal, that doesn't make it necessary. Thomas Aquinas also points out that there's two different types of necessaries. There is a thing who gets its necessity from something else. So I think an example of that would be the sum of the angles of a triangle necessarily equal 180 degrees, but it gets that from the fact that the triangle is three sides on a flat plane.
Are you talking about intrinsic versus historical?
I don't think so. It would be
Okay.
intrinsic versus extrinsic, essentially.
Extrinsic. Okay, got you.
Yeah. So something can be. So something can be necessary, but it's only necessary because something else made it necessary.
Yeah.
But there's also necessary where it is its own reason for being necessary.
It's interdependent.
Not interdependent, it is self-dependent.
Gotcha. What's the may I ask?
Mm-hmm.
Me and my friend actually talked about this. I don't.
Dependent.
Gotcha. What's the may I ask?
Mm-hmm.
Me and my friend actually talked about this. I don't. When I look up the definition for interdependent and self-dependent, they're essentially the same. So
So,
what's the difference
yeah.
between
So the
them?
difference between the two is, have you heard the phrase irreducible complexity?
No.
Okay. So uh, complexity has to do with a thing having parts. So
Mm-hmm.
um, the argument about like for interdependence is eventually we get to a point where let's say we have three parts. All right. Let's call it space, time, and energy, right? Space can't exist without time, time can't exist without space, energy can't exist without the other three, and the other two don't make sense without energy because they measure the energy.
Yeah.
So they would say that because all three are interdependent on each other, all three
Gotcha. Okay.
necessarily exist. So it's talking about the relationship between separate objects and
Okay.
their relation to each other cause all three of them to exist necessarily. Versus something that is self-dependent and is something that doesn't so it would be, just to continue using the analogy, let's say space could exist, and I think there are some mathematical or cosmological models that acknowledge that this could be the case. Let's say space existed without energy and time. Now space exists self-independently, and time and energy are dependent on space.
Mm.
So that's the difference between something being interdependent, which means it can only exist necessarily with the existence of other things, versus a thing that's self-dependent. It exists on its own, period. No other things needed to make it exist necessarily.
Gotcha. I understand that. This just brings. Okay. This just. We're going far from the topic, but what you just said and how you explain it just makes me think of more things. But
You're
I
good.
wouldn't.
Well, that's why I love philosophy, especially theology, because everything is so interconnected that as soon as one question is answered,
Very.
it either brings insight to 20 other subjects or it brings questions for 20 other subjects.
Yeah. I've been on this journey to sort of like go deeper into my faith and understanding through like philosophy. And every single time I learn something and I ask a question, it's always like, well, to understand more, you need to go into
Yeah.
ontology.
Yep.
To go into that, you need to go into axiology. To go into that, you need to go into epistemology. To go into that, you need to go into metaphysics. And it's like, well, that's that's a lot.
I've been
It's so much, man.
so not to this isn't meant to discourage you,
Got you.
but I have been doing this for over 20 years. I've only recently started doing lives like this, but I have been studying philosophy, theology, and my faith ever since I was like 6 years old. I am now 33 years old. And I've only started doing like online debates, mostly over text and forums, when I was in my early 20s, and started doing lives like this and being more active in atheistic spaces, and it like 5 years ago essentially.
Mm.
So this is a long journey. It's rewarding, and I've enjoyed every step of the way. But as people at my work once said, don't judge your chapter 1 to my chapter 5. So just because I'm
Yeah.
much further along, don't get discouraged. Yes, it's a lot, but the good news is you got people around you that are willing to help guide you and are pointing you in the right directions. So you're gonna have a much easier time of it than I am because I basically did it on my own.
Do you have a Discord? Because
I do.
I kind of need a community of
Mhm.
people who
I do have
do stuff
yeah
like this.
I do have a Discord. If you because of the way like I don't know if it's something that I did with my TikTok profile, but I can't have a link set up. I think I just need more followers. But um, if you reach out to me, I can send you a DM with my Discord link for you to join. It's not very active because, as you can see, I'm still a very small creator, but you're able to reach out and either myself or other individuals will be able to help point you to different resources to help you on this journey.
Yeah, that would be great, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else I can help you with?
We kind of never got into the argument.
Well, part of it is I'm like you said, you don't want to go like because of how long it is.
Mhm.
It's so uh real quick. Yeah, nobody on fire. It's in my bio. It's the link tree. But one, because I'm not familiar with the Bridge of Reason. Two, I'm not familiar with Joshua Rasmussen, so I'm not sure on his particular approach to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to give you advice on how to present his argument better on something that
Okay, dokie.
I'm unfamiliar with. Um, but um, the um, but as you go through this and as you read it, you can we'll be able to, especially on the Discord server, have a more in-depth, take it slow and take it one step at a time, going through the argument in that capacity.
Gotcha. Okie dokie. All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. You have a good one.
You too.
All right. Once again, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much for 3.6 thousand likes. And thank you. I see we got 4 new followers, so thank you everyone who decided to follow. Um, this is something that I'm trying to do. Like my goal is, a friend of mine mentioned to me. He came from the uh, FSSP tradition of Catholicism and left the faith. And he mentioned to me that there's a lot of content creators out there that will talk about Catholicism versus Protestantism or even Catholicism versus Muslims, but there isn't really a whole lot of Catholicism for atheists. And this is something that I feel especially gifted at. As you can see, I've gotten um, a lot of atheists in my chat who are um, that are supporting. In fact, I've had several atheists push me very hard to do this type of content on TikTok, where it's talking with theists and even atheists to walk through the arguments. So I'm glad that this is resonating. People, I was worried that in a world full of people who want to see bloodbaths and debates, that this wouldn't be a popular thing. So I'm glad to see that people are enjoying it. But let's see. I currently don't have anyone in the guest request box. And I know that I saw a notification that Ogar just went live, so I'm assuming most of my audience is probably going over to watch that request box. And I know that I saw a notification that Ogar just went live, so I'm assuming most of my audience is probably going over to watch that. But we'll give it a little bit more to see if anyone wants to come up and have a conversation. And just a note, and I'll make an announcement as well, I am probably not going to be going lives on Fridays, and I want to try to keep my weekends free. Fridays because I am a filthy blue player in Magic the Gathering, and I now have the opportunity to start playing Magic the Gathering again, and want to head down to my local draft night and play some Magic. So I'll probably be doing these Monday through Thursdays, try to have a video recording done either Saturday or Sunday, most likely Sundays. And do sporadic TikTok shorts, and I'll try to get those on YouTube as well. And if there's any topics that y'all want me to go over, feel free to go to my YouTube or Discord and let me know. I'm always open for ideas. In fact, my most recent video and a lot of my shorts was inspired because Ogar Debates asked me to dig into the modal contingency argument. And so if there's an argument you want me to look into, feel free to reach out and I'll be more than happy to do a long form video on it. But yeah, I think everyone decided to go over to Ogar. So I'll go ahead and call it. And if you go ahead and head over to Ogar Debates and tell him that Catholic Thinker sent y'all. Y'all have a good one.